Well, welcome. This is Kels Goodman here today, and I'm here with a good friend of mine named David Lindsley. Some of you probably know him. You know his art, and you've probably seen him at the conferences in the past, and at the Film Foundation conferences, things like that. And you see his art, which is amazing. And I even have some stuff here that he's recreated. We're going to kind of talk about that for a little bit. But I tell you, the reason why I'm bringing David here today is because I've been telling you guys about the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society and who they are and where all this content I'm trying to pull from. Wayne May introduced me to it, and I went with him one year, and then I went another year about 4 years later. Just really enjoyed this conference, and it's really, if you're doing real research on who was here long before Columbus in an effort to kind of make connections to the Book of Mormon, this conference does it. And it's amazing to hear them talk about, like, they'll list all these things that are possibilities, from native stories to ancient journals and things. But they even bring in the Book of Mormon, and it's fascinating hearing all these guys who are not members of the church talking about Lehi and Nephi's journey, their journey here to America, and things like that. It's really fascinating. And then I'm looking through there, and then voila, there was David Lindsley. He was doing a presentation over there, and I thought, I got to have him here. And so I watched his presentation, and he gave this amazing connection between an artist's viewpoint and what is there in the setup. But first, let's just kind of do a quick introduction with you, David. Thank you for joining me today, and I appreciate you coming out. David's a good friend of mine. I've known him for years, and I've seen him at the conferences. Why don't you kind of give our audience a little bit of your background?
Well, as you mentioned, I've been doing artwork for really all my life, and it was back in 2009 that I was introduced to the Heartland model. Now, before that point, I had done some Book of Mormon paintings, and I did it in the what I thought was the correct scene was, Central America.
Oh, you did some you
Yeah,
heathen, how dare you? Yeah, that's just so
yeah.
bad. I'm just kidding. No, no,
And
I'm sure
so,
there was really, really good. I actually have seen some of them, and they're just great. They're awesome, and they
oh,
tell the
thanks.
story that you knew. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead, David.
Oh no, that's fine. And
So,
so in 2009, an elderly couple that was in our ward knocked on our door and handed us one of Rod's his very first DVD, and we watched that, and we were gobsmacked, right? And it was just, oh my gosh, and it made so much sense. When I was doing these other paintings before, I would get some Natural Geographic magazines and look at Mayan things and try to get some inspiration. And as I'm looking through those things, I'm thinking, so this Mayan stuff is Nephites, huh? I don't know how that works, but okay, And then after I found out about the Heartland, it's like, oh my gosh, no wonder it didn't feel right, because the Heartland thing does feel right, and it is right. And so from that point on, I also started studying the infamous Michigan artifacts, so-called infamous. It's famous for us, but infamous for the critics, and because they dismiss them as fakes, and you look at them and it's like, well, maybe, maybe not. But I've been looking at them for a long time. And as you mentioned, I've been making replicas. And when I make the replicas, I have to study these things. I have these really nice digital photographs of each artifact. I blow them way up and I trace them in Photoshop, and you have to zoom it way in. And I started realizing that there are some differences between plate and plate and plate or whatever, as far as the style and so on. And so I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to
oh,
talk about my findings of how I have noticed these differences and just other things like that.
that's great. No, that's good. Well, yeah, I love the replicas. I've owned several over the years, and they've been good for film, and they look great on a desk, and so I say that's and then when I saw you talk about them, one thing just to remember, the Michigan relics are definitely under question, but that doesn't mean you totally excuse them. And that's sort of in the world today where we just cancel things out just because, oh well, that's that was totally different, and that was found by somebody who was just trying to make money or whatever. And I find in
Right.
the 1800s it's very difficult to come across these things and to keep going as fakes, but there were fakes, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean everything else wasn't. And so we have to balance it. And so I'm excited to see your what you're going to show us today about what you found. So
Okay.
what I'm going to do is have David kick in the PowerPoint here, and let's talk about what you have found today is from an artist viewpoint, which I find fascinating.
Okay, here we
So
go. Well, let's see. I'll share my screen.
boop 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 boop. Here comes technology at its best, right there.
Okay, the Michigan artifacts. So as we mentioned, that there'll be these things were discovered in the 1800s, and as I've studied them, I've realized that things are not quite what they say that they would be, as far as fakes. And so let's go right into this next slide here. So just as a recap, in the 1800s, when farmers were coming across from the east to inherit the land, they would plow up their fields and they would find things in the ground, copper and slate and pottery and all kinds of artifacts and lots of arrowheads and mica and tons of things. And in the burial mounds that dot the land, and there's thousands and thousands of these ancient Indian burial mounds, they would dig down and they would find, yeah, skeletons and lots of artifacts and those things. And so they're scattered throughout the whole country,
Yeah.
mainly the Mississippi Valley and Ohio Valley.
Yeah,
I'm
and we
going to
have to
talk about,
remember that's during that time in which there was like the rules of digging were pretty much non-existent. You
yeah,
just
there were no
it's your
rules.
land, you dig and you find stuff, and it goes in your living room. And yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's not like today where if somebody finds something, then like all of a sudden the local government takes over and all kinds of stuff. I mean it was a different time as
A lot of
well.
the copper that they found, they would just melt down. And it's like, oh, I'll just take this copper and melt it down and make a tool out of it. And so a lot of that was lost.
Yeah.
And so there was in Michigan alone, there were 27 different counties between 1812 and 1919 that were found in just all kinds of circumstances. And, 1812 is an interesting date too, because this is years before the supposed forgers were making forgeries or
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, this is long before they were born. And so that they kind of gloss over that little fact.
Yeah.
So items like this, here's some pottery items made out of clay. I don't think any of these exist anymore. We have a photo of them, and that's all we've got.
That's
A
amazing.
lot of these things were thrown away because they thought, well, they're fakes, and there were they estimate that there were about 10,000 of these things, both in slates and pottery and so on and so forth. And because the academics at the time and now says there was nobody here before Columbus, and certainly not anybody with this kind of knowledge of writing and artistic skills. So they must be fakes. We don't
Yeah.
understand this, so they're fakes. And so here's another photo too, where none of these exist anymore, but it's this is taken probably around 1900s, 1800s.
That's an impressive collection too.
It's a
Yeah.
very impressive
Good.
collection. So here are some various items that I've actually done replicas of. A compass there towards the bottom, and some other plates, things like that kind of interest me to kind of look really cool. And then there's some other things here, like that box, and well, 4 boxes. I've recreated all 4 of these things. The big one in the middle there, black and white one, that's the only photograph that exists of that one. And so where it is now, I have no idea.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then there was lots and lots of copper pieces, lots of pipes, beautiful pipes, and then even some coins. And so there's a huge variety of these things, a lot of architectural pieces too. And of course, thousands and thousands, probably millions of arrowheads
Yeah.
all across the country.
Seems
So
like some of those arrowheads were made of copper, it looked like.
yes, they
Some of
were. In
those
fact, that
spears and a lot of copper.
yep,
So,
they had copper arrowheads. Wayne May, that's his collection photo. Now here's some pictures taken of the from the Lansing, Michigan Museum, where most of these artifacts are. There's some in private collections, but the vast majority is in Michigan, in Lansing. And so these photos show the clay fragments of who knows what. I see a
yeah.
couple of cup handles and various things like that. And these things, the clay did not do well. They would transport these were originally intact for the most part, but they would transport them in just cracker barrels. And by the time they got to where they're supposed to go, they're all broken up. It was a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, this picture here was taken in 1910 of the artifact, but today it only exists in fragments.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So those fragments are available to see. I've heard that most of these are like you if you go to Lansing and you go to the university and if you catch them on a good day, that they'll actually let you handle some of these that are still in existence.
Hopefully so. They don't
So
really care for these things.
yeah, which is amazing because I do remember Ryan Fisher and one of his episodes of Nephite Explorer, he got to go to Lansing and he actually got to take pictures. You see him, some video of him, some of the
Good.
artifacts taking pictures. But
Excellent.
but it's amazing, you're right, to see those pieces and what a devastation. Oh my goodness.
It is a tragedy. It is, and there's other pieces that I look at it. See, I was gathered all these things up to make a replica of that one, and I was able to do it, gathering up all the pieces. And for the most part, they were there. Only one piece of the lid, but the other little pieces that are shown in the photos, it's like, what do they go to? I don't know. They don't match each other. They don't match anything else. They're just
Wow.
gone.
That's
They're just
amazing.
gone. And so, real or fake? So that's what we're going to kind of explore a little bit here. This is going to be just a really quick run through on these things. I have a lot more research I'll present at another time,
Yeah.
but let's kind of go with this. Now, first of all, and this is the one, this is my favorite box. You've got a
Oh,
replica, and I've got a
that's right.
replica
Got it
here.
right here in the back.
Yep.
So love it.
So when I first, yeah, when I first saw this box, I was just wowed. I'm still wowed by it. It's absolutely beautiful because what I've seen before are just slates, just single pieces, and I didn't know that they made boxes. And so I decided to make a replica of this. And so as I'm tracing these things, I realized that at least 3 different artists made this box, possibly 4, maybe even 5. And so I'm going to run
Oh
this through.
wow.
Yeah. So I'm going to
Interesting.
run this through. So
All right.
here's the front of the box. I assume it's the front. And this, I'm going to call this one Artist A. And Artist A was the best artist of the 3. He did really, really nice border there using straight edge shown
Yeah.
in green. And his line style was really, really good. Nice and confident strokes. Just a really, really good artist. That's Artist A. And then also, I think Artist A did the back of the box. Now, in the back of the box, we have a similar border with,
Yeah.
straight, really nice straight lines and little scallops and so on and so forth. And then as he did this box, it seems to me that he intended to have 2 lines of written characters. And
Yeah.
so with those 2 lines, he made very faint ledger lines, top
Yeah.
and bottom,
Look
and
like
top
they
and
look
bottom.
like guidelines or
Yeah,
something.
guidelines.
Yeah.
And so that way he makes sure that the characters are the same height, they don't slope or go up or something like that. And so he did that. And then he wrote all his words, which I don't know what they are. But then he also had these 2 characters at the bottom, which were probably an afterthought, it says to me, because the ledger lines go right through. And
Yeah.
so he wouldn't have put the ledger lines in after he'd drawn them. That's why I think they were first. And he probably thought that his wording would go all the way across, but he stopped.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
think occasionally you've seen ones where when they're doing those lines, they keep going and it gets smaller, kind of like anybody who writes a letter where
Yep.
they write and it's like, oh, I only got so much space left, and then it
Yep.
looks different. And in this guy's case, he obviously had extra space, and so he drew those pictures. So, or
And we're
she.
gonna cover that too about the
Oh,
extra space. We'll talk about that.
oh, great. Okay.
So he put in these two lines, and then you see at the top corner there the what we refer to as the mystic symbol.
Yeah.
And you and your viewers probably know all about that. It's Yod He Va, which is the name of God. And then on that third line, which I have in purple, there's some more characters, but the character style, the writing style, doesn't match the top two lines. If you
Yeah.
look at the third line there, there's no ledger lines. It's much smaller, and it's not drawn very nicely. It's kind of just chiseled in there real roughly. And that mystic symbol, there's also one down at the bottom, and they don't match. The one at the bottom has rounded tops like a carrot or something, and the one on the bottom and the one on the top has the more correct nail head look.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's almost as if somebody else had come in after he was done and added another line.
Yeah. Just and for people who've just a refresher on the mystic symbol, a lot of people also feel that it's five nails, which would intend, a reference to Christ and the five nails
Five
that
nails,
kept him up. So that's
two in the wrist and hands,
that's right.
and one in the foot, both
One in
feet.
the foot. That's
Both,
correct.
both
And
feet put
so,
together like this, and then one right through it.
and you'll see that mystic symbol on a lot of these artifacts. It's just
They are
everywhere.
on every one of them,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. All the copper ones, all the clay ones, just pretty much every one of them. I would say 99.99%.
Yeah.
So another thing on this slide here is that you see those big K looking characters there.
Yeah.
Well, they're really nice. They're really tall, and they go over the ledger lines for some reason, and they're real straight. But then you have down at the bottom some other kind of K looking figures, and they don't look the same. They have a different style to them. I think somebody else came in, and after he was done, they said, oh, well, we better have this line in. And so they added this extra characters or something.
Yeah.
So here is the two edges of the box, the two sides. And this, I think, is a totally different artist, artist B. And here's why. Instead of putting nice straight outlines around his little drawing, he had a freehand gouging effect, just kind of chiseled it in,
Yeah.
instead of a nice scribe. He just chiseled it in all around the sides. So it's a different style.
Yeah.
And then,
Definitely.
yeah, and then there they are there, the lines what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then he did his figures, and this is the only place I've ever seen a flower on on all the
That's
artifacts.
a good point. That's a really good point.
It's a beautiful flower, but
Yeah.
his line weight was actually much thicker than artist A, and just really sort of plowed in there, really thick and deep. And then this is the only time I've ever seen this too. Little dots in the background.
Yeah. It's like outer space or something. That's how I
Yeah.
used to do outer space as a kid. Who knows? I don't know.
I think he was trying to do a texture or something. Maybe they put
Yeah.
color in these things. I don't know. But that's a totally different style. And the
Totally different.
yeah, the other places don't have this. Now here's the lid. And so I think a third artist did the lid because the style is very, very different. So we'll talk about this. Artist C. So first of all, he put in really nice straight lines around, or maybe somebody put it in for him. He did these really nice straight outlines, which I show in white there. And then he had at it. And so he did all the
Wow.
the various border. Now, if you look closely at that border, it is sloppy. The lines are freehand. They're not using a straight edge. His little zigzags are sloppy all over the place. And it's just, that zigzag doesn't match the zigzag on the other side.
Yeah.
It's just in the four corners, it's supposed to have sort of pattern, but again, they're kind of not so good.
They're a real mishmash. That's
a
for
real
sure.
mishmash. Now, artist A would not have done it this way, and probably not artist B. And then on the lid, he's got some written characters, and they're real. What's the word? Cautious, and they're not drawn really well. Now, there's those, and then he did the portraits. Now, these portraits on top are actually pretty good, a
Yeah.
little bit better than the other artists.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit more detail, and I'll show you that here. So each artist, A, B, and C, did a little drawing of a face. And these things are a little different from one to the other. And so, for instance, artist A and B drew their lines thick, as you can see.
Yeah.
Artist C, you can see that their line weight was much, much thinner.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's true. Look at that.
and here's another thing too that I thought was kind of interesting. So when artist A would draw an eyeball or an eye, he would draw a eyebrow, and then with one stroke, there's the eye. And so that's his style. And artist B, for drawing an eye, he would do the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid, and then an eyebrow. And
Yeah.
then artist C,
Or to
we
see
would
it's like
do,
a full eyeball there.
yeah, he would do the um, eye and the eyelid and the lower eyelid and the eyebrow all together. So again, very different styles. Also, their ears are drawn differently. Nobody could really seem to figure out how to draw an ear correctly.
not
It's
like like something from Peanuts or something. So
yeah.
the little circle with the little hair swoop.
And
So
also, this is kind of interesting. On artist B and C, they both drew the little cheek line that goes from the nose to the corner of the mouth. But artist A omitted that. He didn't put that into his. So that right there, just even those three
yeah,
portraits tell me that this is a these are different artists. And here again, here's a recap of all the lettering. So artist A did those really nice purple letters there on the top row. And artist C did the really timid characters on the lid. And somebody else did that third row on the sides, the one with
yeah,
the rounded, mystic symbol and so on. And maybe it was artist B, but it wasn't artist A and it wasn't artist C.
that's fascinating.
And
And
then,
it's interesting to see those you see the K things that you saw
yeah,
on both of them. And I love that that the B artist, that third line, that's totally could be different group. Didn't even phase that. So
yep.
different person.
Now I think a fourth artist did the little sculpture on top. It could have been one of the other three artists, but something just tells me that no, I don't think that's right. I think that there was artist A did his thing and B and C did their thing. So there's one to do the size, the ends, the lids, and then one to do the little sculpture that went on top of the box.
Yeah.
There it is. There's the whole thing. And then maybe even a fifth artist would had created the base that this fits on, and then also created the copper corners that hold the thing together, and the little copper bit on the very bottom that keeps everything onto the base.
Yeah. So there's
So
copper on each side,
mhm,
and then it looks like there's a little copper in the middle.
that holds it down
Yeah, that
onto the
holds it
base.
down. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Here, so I got it.
He's
Here's
got
my
it right there.
yeah.
Bam.
So there we go. And there was a way that they fixed the lid, the statue to the lid, and then we have the copper corners on the
Yeah.
four corners, and then this thing here to hold it onto the base. So
That's fascinating.
well, thanks. That's kind of what I'm seeing as an artist. It's like, no, this is not one person. Does that say it's fake or not? I don't know. But the thing of it is, it was a lot of people made this box. And
Well, and I'm really curious about the characters as well. I'm curious as to what the in the midst aside from the art, I'm curious to what those characters are if we've ever besides the mystic symbol, if there's ever been an attempt to translate the characters by
There
any
are some.
means.
There
Is
are
there?
some. Not many, unfortunately, but some.
Yeah.
In fact, we'll probably look at some of those. Let's go over to the next thing here. Oh, there's the copper corners.
Yeah.
So left or right. So when you look at these plates and the way that they're written, there's a lot of writing on them. And which way do they go? They go left or they go right? Now, some people think that they're, well, it's one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to talk about that. So as you probably know, Hebrew is written from right to left. And it
Yeah.
always is. That's just the way it is. That's backwards from what we do. And then Egyptian, if it's in columns like this, it goes from the top to the bottom. It does not go from the bottom up to the top. It's always from the top
I never knew
to the
that.
bottom.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, but wait, there's more. They also wrote horizontally. So when it's horizontally, it's sometimes written from right to left, but it's also written sometimes left to right.
Huh.
So how do you know which way it goes? Is it left to
Yeah.
right or right to left? And it took archaeologists a long time to figure this out, but they finally did figure it out. And they figured out that it depends on which way all the faces of the animals and people are facing.
Oh, that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
if they're facing to the right, then it reads from right to left. And if they're everybody facing to the left, then it goes from left to right. So they went both ways.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they would vacillate between the two, but that's what they did.
That would be pretty logical. I could see that as being one of the reasons for going in one direction or the other is where the faces are.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And so let's go look at the Michigan place. Now, here's one here. Okay, so when you look at this and you look at the various characters, well, it's not Hebrew. It's just flat out not Hebrew. But it is a combination of Egyptian, some Egyptian, highlighted in green, and also some Hebrew. This particular plate has a whole bunch of the mystic symbols all over it. Now, Hebrew within within itself is going to go from right to left. It always is Yod Hey Vav, and so, but it also has characters that, well, we don't know what they are. We've never seen these before, and so which way does it go, left or right? Because it doesn't follow the Hebrew line of thinking, and maybe it follows the Egyptian one, but I don't know. So it's a strange combination of a bunch of things. So in the Book of Mormon, Mormon says, "Now behold, we have written this record according to our knowledge in the characters which are called among us the Reformed Egyptian, being handed down and altered by us according to our manner of speech." So they created new characters from the Egyptian to fit their manner of speech.
Yeah.
So when you look at this, like, hey, all right, so is this, some sort of Reformed Egyptian? And it is, and if it is, which way does it go? And so is it maybe have some birds or faces or something that we could look at? It's like, well, there's no birds or animals in this one. And there's some that actually have some birds and animals, but some are facing left and some are facing right and some are facing forward. So that's no help. What do you do?
Yeah.
So here's what I've kind of stumbled on. So here's that plate again. So which way? So what I've noticed is that all those little yellow lines, they are left justified. And the ones on the right, which I have little red marks, they're ragged. That's what you call it in literary form. It's a ragged thing. It's left justified and ragged. So you start at the left, you go to the right until you run out of room, you start another line.
So it's almost as if that's the end of the sentence.
Possibly so.
Yeah.
Or at least they are out of room or something. But yeah, probably out of sentence. And there's another clue, and that is they drooped.
Ah.
If you don't have ledger lines and you just write on a blank piece of paper and you just write, your lines are going to eventually start drooping, and here you see it. And so to me, it shows that whatever this thing says is from the left to the right.
Yeah. Wow. That's a cool observation. I didn't even think about that, especially when you drooped it. It's like, yeah, that's about how we write these days. Especially when there's no lines to write on. You're freestyling it there.
Yep.
So,
Yep. That's
but
right. And so, well, here's another one. Okay, so you look at this one, it's like, okay, so not real sure on this, but let's put in the
yeah,
little left and the right. And the sloping is like, oh, well, this is very obviously going from the left to the right. On the left side, it's pretty much justified. On the right side, it's just all over the place.
yeah.
Now, on the very bottom line, he did have some little ledger lines. And kind of, he had like little outlines. And he had a little box there, and so that box there is nice and straight. But for the other lines on top, it's just it went from left to right.
Well, I wonder if that line is there in the middle because of the picture below. I wonder if it was
Probably it's
some
like a
kind of way
title.
to, yeah, maybe a way to know they were going to draw that, because I don't know what's on the picture below, on the
It's a
drawing below.
face.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they probably had to make space for that. So they just drew it to be able to make space for the face, knowing that was going to be important. And then
Mhm.
lines. Yeah, who knows what they were thinking, but you can see some hints there. That's amazing.
And by the way, notice the mystic symbol on that very last line before it's nice and straight. Very
Mhm.
much you can see the nail shape, very triangular mystic symbol shape there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at one more. I'm looking at this is like, okay, well, is this left or right? And then as I look at it and put in the little start and stops, like, okay, it is definitely left to right because the left side is very justified and the right is ragged, and in the end, then it slopes. You got another face on the bottom of that one too.
Yeah.
But
Fascinating. Wow.
now another thing, and you mentioned this a little earlier, some of these things suffered from the dreaded plan effect. I
Yeah.
mean, plan ahead syndrome.
That's how I do it,
Yeah.
sadly. So,
So you're looking at these things, and as you start on the left side there, it's like all kinds of room, nice and big, kind of space. And then as you go to the right, it starts, whoa, it gets really smaller, and the spaces between the characters start getting much, much narrower. And so that's another example, or to me, they went from left to right. Now, remember, this is not Hebrew. And some people think, oh, it must go right to left because it's Hebrew. It's not Hebrew.
yeah.
There might be an occasional Hebrew character in there, but it's not Hebrew. It's not really Egyptian either. And here, where that blue arrow, you can see that they really scrunched in some, characters at the very far right there.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then there's one more here. Now, um, oh, this is with the that last line you were talking about, how they
Yeah.
squeezed one in. I think they were trying to center that line, but and they because they made an indentation, and then but by the time they got to the right side, it's like they overflowed. And so, what's really kind of intriguing to me is that they would push things into the right, they squeeze in that very last character. Now the thing of it is, if I was going to forge this thing, and I was just making up characters, just making all kind of little squeaky lines, and I got to the end of my line, I would stop. But they wanted to make sure they got everything in, like this one here. You start to the left, you go to the right, and you squeezed in that whatever that is at the very far side,
Yeah.
which kind of indicates to me that again, these things are not forged. These people knew what they were writing. It made sense to them, and they wanted to get in that whole sentence while they could.
Yeah.
And there's
That's
a lot more
amazing.
examples, but we'll move on. So I want to talk about this. Now, I didn't talk about this at the apps conference there in Michigan because the audience wasn't really LDS, other than Wayne and me and one other guy.
Yeah.
But War and Peace. Now, I think this is really kind of interesting because a lot of the plates, well, let's start here with a quote by Mormon. It says, and when the armies of the Lamanites saw that the people of Nephi, or that Moroni, had prepared his people with breastplates and with arm shields, yea, and also shields to defend their heads, and they were also were dressed with thick clothing. So that's the Nephites. But he says, now the army of Zarahemna, that's the Lamanites, was not prepared with any such thing. They had only their swords and their scimitars, their bows and their arrows, their stones and their slings, so all their weapons, and they were naked, save it were a skin which was girded about their loins. Okay, so these two armies that are dressed very differently from each other. We look at a plate like this, and look, there's a couple of armies. Now, the ones on the left have tunics on, long
Oh
robes
wow. Look
going
at
down to
that.
their ankles, right? And they have
Yeah.
helmets on their head, and they've got some spears, and they're holding spears or whatever, and their weapons. And you look at the ones on the right, and they don't have any clothes on,
Oh my goodness.
but
Yeah,
they do
that's a
have
great
they
observation.
have headdresses on, and they're carrying bows and arrows.
Hmm.
And
Holy
then,
cow.
isn't that interesting? And
That
so
is fascinating.
here's another one, same thing.
Same
So
thing.
you
Wow.
got the one on the right, they've got they're waving flags, and they got helmets on, and I don't know if those are tunics or they're short tunics or they got trousers on, something. And the one on the right, they've got, feather headdresses, and I think they're wearing pants, but I can't quite tell it on that. And then here's another one, and
Oh
you
my
can see
goodness.
here.
Wow.
So two very differently dressed armies. Now, the people that supposedly fake these things, why would they make plates like this that support the Book of Mormon when none of them were LDS and none of them were trying to prove the Book of Mormon true?
Yeah, exactly.
It was furthest from their
Amazing.
minds. And yet
Yeah.
here we have this example. Again, one on the right, I mean, on the left, they've got helmets on, and you can see their clothing. And the one on the right looks like they have some sort of trousers on or something. But
They
again,
got some kind of waist thing, like it's almost like the girded about their loins
mhm.
material, and that's about it.
And remember, in
So
the Book of Mormon, it says they shaved their heads and they were, painted. They painted themselves red to be really scary looking, and that would be scary. I mean, you're going out to army, meet the enemy, and they're like, look like they're covered in blood, and they're running at you and yelling and shrieking, and it's like, yikes. So,
wow, that's amazing. I've seen these and I never even put two and two together when it comes to that story. So that's amazing, David.
well, thanks.
Holy cow.
There's one more I want to show,
Okay.
and this one here. Now, you see the two portraits on the top? Those are the two leaders of the army. You have the Nephi leader on the left, I think, and on the right you have the Lamanite leader. He's got a feather headdress, right? Kind of like
Yeah.
modern day Indians. And then down at the bottom, the same two figures are shown at the bottom. There's one at the very far left, and I don't know who he is, but the two figures, the two portraits on the top are echoed down at the bottom.
Yeah.
So we kind of zoom in a little bit, and you can see that between the two portraits on top, you have a couple of things. Now, here's something that has been sort of translated somewhat, and that is the son of the left hand, son of the right hand. And so what this means basically is that the guy on the left is a good guy. It's right, he's righteous. And the one
Yeah.
on the right is unrighteous. And so that would kind of fit. And if you're Nephite and you're making this thing, it's like, okay. And then between them is the mystic symbol. And right between the mystic symbol is, oh, by the way, there's also the all-seeing eye of God looking upward at the good guy and
Yeah.
looking downward at the bad guy.
Fascinating.
And then between them is what looks to me like a pipe.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know if we can see that pipe over the underneath our uh, thumbnails.
Is that like smoke coming out of it, or is that
I think
just
it's
the
smoke coming
pipe?
out of it.
Yeah.
And so this is like a peace treaty, right? You light the peace pipe and you have a peace treaty. And so when you look at the scriptures, for instance, it doesn't have to be this particular one, but that Moroni took the weapons of war from the Lamanites, and after they had entered into a covenant with him of peace, they were suffered to depart into the wilderness. So we have a kind of a uh, thing from the Book of Mormon where it kind of talks about them having peace treaties. Now, what's really interesting about this plate, if you turn the thing over on the other side, this is what you get. Oh,
Oh
I've got
my
that plate.
goodness. I have never seen that.
I've got it right here. Here's
That's
the plate,
wild.
and you got the what it looks to me is like Saint George and the Dragon. Why in the world is Saint George and the Dragon on the back of one of these plates? And then over here, you also again have the son of the right hand, which is a good guy, and on the other side, where the dragon is, son of the left hand, which is a bad guy or unrighteousness. And so, like, okay, I mean, it's a dragon. I don't get it. Why is there a dragon?
Yeah.
And I thought about this for a long time, and then I found this scripture. Now, in the case of the Lamanites, now in this case, the Lamanites did fight exceedingly. Yea, never had the Lamanites been known to fight with such exceeding great courage. No, not even from the beginning. They did fight like dragons.
Dragons. Oh my goodness. Wow. That would be an interesting artist rendition of that scripture. I can totally see that.
So you have
Wow.
their army represented as a dragon,
Yeah.
and the Nephite army represented, as the hero leader, I guess, of that particular army. They did fight like dragons.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
here's another one here where look, you have a dragon and he's being slayed by this army of Nephites on the left side. They have the turbans and they have the long uh, uh, coat,
Mhm.
and they're slaying the dragon.
Wow. Holy cow.
And here's
I
another
have never
dragon.
seen the dragons. I've seen a lot of these plates, but I've never seen the dragon in them.
There's three that
Uh,
I could find, and here's all three. And then
wow.
here's another scripture I thought was kind of interesting. And it came to pass that the people of Limhi began to drive the Lamanites before them. Yet they were not half as numerous as the Nephites weren't half as numerous as the Lamanites, but they fought for their lives and for their wives and for their children. Therefore, and we're talking about the Lamanites here, they exerted themselves and like dragons did they fight.
Oh my goodness.
And
That's
so it's sort of a kind of a popular term to say that, I assume, that in the scriptures in the Book of Mormon is like, they fought like dragons. And so how interesting that on the Michigan plates we have dragons
yeah.
fighting against dragons.
Well, dragons is such an older term because it's, we like dinosaur, the term dinosaur only started in the mid 1800s, whereas dragon was something that was much earlier. And a lot of people think there's somewhat of a relation between the two. But the
Exactly so.
dragon, yeah, the dragon idea is like it's much more ancient.
Yes,
Uh,
it is.
I've never not really done the study on how early the word dragon is actually used, but it obviously came from somewhere. And so this is fascinating. This is really good.
Well, now we're going to talk about costly apparel,
Okay.
and which we know all about in the scriptures about the Nephites, right? And so a lot of these plates, and this is just three, but there's a lot of these plates that show, head to toe or whatever of people wearing very elaborate clothing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
incredibly elaborate. And so just for fun, because I'm an artist, decided, well, what would this look like if it was, what was the artist looking at when he had this guy standing here and now I'm going to draw him, And so maybe they were very colorful like this, or maybe like this with really fine embroidery. I mean,
Very bright.
you can't portray this thing scratching into a slate. And so you do the best you can with little cross hatches and little squiggles and stuff like that and little flourishes, trying to relay to us as an audience, what all these people may have looked like.
Yeah.
I just put in just some random colors,
That's
but
fun.
it does show these and a bunch more very costly, very elaborate looking clothing, but not all. Some of them are just kind of dressed, just kind of normal, I guess. But these look like they're the priests or the leaders or rich people or something. I don't know what.
Well, and the purple is I mean, it's fun that you use purple because purple was also a sign of expense.
Yep.
It was an expensive piece of clothing that turned purple, that at least in the early days.
Yep.
So, uh,
Okay.
wow, that's awesome.
Thanks. So we're gonna talk about a thing that I think is really fun, and that wait a minute, here's the scripture. And it came to pass that the people of the church began to wax proud, and in all these things they were lifted up in the pride of their eyes, for they began to wear very costly apparel. And there's some of these verses that show up all the time in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the mystic symbol again. And so you see there on the bottom where there's the mystic symbol, and reading from the right to the left, you have Yod. That's the angled one, and then the H is He, and then the ones and straight up and down is Va, Yod He Va. So these things that we mentioned, they're just all over the place, and they're on the slates, and they're on the pottery, the copper items, and you can see them all over there. The one on the clay box a little hard to see, but it's on the side.
Yeah.
So okay, so I titled this one "Hidden Mystic Symbols," and you'll see why in a minute here. So here's that box again, our favorite box. And so looking at that front, you see the raven there, or bird, drinking the bitter cup. And so this is a sorrowful event. And then over on the right side, you have this really strange group of figures. You have, four figures standing there and one laying horizontal. And I thought, okay, well, that's weird. I guess this is the guy that died, and these are, the pallbearers or mourners, especially the one like reeling backwards, because like, oh my gosh, this person has died. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I remembered. Now, by the way, this box is not part of the Michigan collection. This box was found on the lake, on the shores of Lake St. Clair, over on the Canadian side, kind of in the Michigan area, but over in Canada.
Oh, really? Oh, so it wasn't found in the area where all the other artifacts were.
Nope. And it has the same lettering, the same style of everything, and so on and so forth as the rest. There's a very consistent lettering between all of these artifacts.
Yeah.
There's just certain characters they used and no more. So I remembered I had seen this before, and I went through Wayne's collection of photographs, and I found this one. Now, I was like, wow, it's the same thing. You have
look at that.
Somebody laying down. You can see they got a little fringe on the bed there, and then you have some people standing up. And by the way, they're dressed very nicely. You can see, the artist tried to describe all that. And I was like, how very strange. I didn't know what the connection was. And it took me a long time to figure this out. But are you ready? Okay. So here it is.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yod He Va.
Holy cow.
They are portraying it much like the old YMCA. Remember that?
Yeah.
YMCA. And so they are portraying those characters, the Yod He Va. And so you go back to the other box. Okay, does the same thing apply to this box?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure. Oh my goodness. What an observation. That's pretty amazing.
Well, thanks. And somebody using a left side brain would look at this thing and go, I don't know. But
did you tell Wayne? Did Wayne not know that? Is this something you showed Wayne then?
Oh yeah, he didn't know. He actually put this in his Ancient American magazine a few years back.
Oh, that's
article
awesome.
About this back in 2014, I think it was. And so anyway, just in case you didn't catch it, it also shows up on the right above each of the things. You see the little mystic symbol right there in the middle.
Wow.
So
holy cow. Well, for a lot of people who you've seen Wayne talk about the mystic symbol, just kind of a reminder that the mystic symbol has been seen in numerous places. I think there is a Native American friend that he had that's actually goes to the Ancient Artifact Preservation Conference who had a mystic symbol, and that was one of his connections to it being both a native sign and a Jewish sign. And you see it, and you see it in I think it's even in a couple of churches. Yeah, you can find the sign.
Yes, back east.
Back east.
And Wayne has a whole presentation of that where this is called mystic. It was coined mystic symbol by Henrietta Mertz because she didn't know what the heck it was.
Yeah.
And so But then the other researchers eventually figured out with like the Indians, it's like this is our name of God. We they call it Yod-Heva. That's what they call it. And in the Jewish, it was similar to that. And yeah, so Wayne has some really interesting stories about all of that, with the India connection, with the Jewish connection with Jewish things back east. And there's also other rocks and things that are like, even like the Mediterranean. I think there was a rock that had this symbol on it. And so it's a very identifying thing. It basically is Jehovah
Yeah.
or Jehovah. And so that's the name of God. And so I don't have the scripture, but you remember that scripture in the Book of Mormon where it says, we talk of God, we talk of Christ, we preach of Christ, we do everything in the name of Christ, you know. And so when you look at all these plates, like, man, they wrote the name of Christ on everything to kind of as a reminder of you know, who it is that we look forward to, you know, as for our redemption.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's really amazing, David. I really appreciate that. That's
Well, that
it's like I said, I've seen it numerous times, and also to know that the box was not necessarily part of the that's new to me as well. I thought the box was actually part of the rest of the Michigan. Is it stored with the Michigan? Uh,
nope.
no.
No, it's in the collection of a family that lives who discovered it back in the 1890s, I think it was. They discovered this box and the sundial and a bunch of other things, and it's all in their collection. And and there's other things too that are other than private collections, not very many, but the majority are in Michigan. And what's really in the Lansing, Michigan Museum. But what's really interesting to me is that all the ones found outside of the Michigan collection and in the Michigan collection, they're all the same style. They have the same writing, the same language, the same everything. By the way, this particular slate is a lid. There's a box that used to be underneath of this, but you can tell it's a lid because it's the way that it's shaped. It's not shaped like the regular you know, single thing like this, where there's just one piece.
Yeah, the
It has a
edges
border all
like
around
the
it. It has little indentations and so on and so forth. It's a lid.
yeah.
So
That's
um,
great. That's amazing.
oh, thanks. That's all I have for now. I
Okay.
think I mean, we could do some more later, but
Well,
that's a
I think that's yeah, definitely go to davidlindsley.com. He's got some amazing videos. He's got about 5 of them, I think, that you have up right now.
five for
Um,
now. I'm working on some more.
Working on more, and he's definitely had some good views on there as well, and so got some good reactions. And of course, with with any kind of research like this, you get the goofballs that want to come and challenge you, which
Yeah,
is fine. But then you also get the good reactions from people and that are learning, because that's what we're trying to do here. Is we're trying to learn. We're trying to continue to figure out who was here long before Columbus, and is there any connection with the Book of Mormon? And what an amazing find. And so the box, I think that might be something. Do you know if the box is have you ever seen the box itself, or you've seen just pictures, or do you know if there is a uh
just pictures,
just pictures?
and luckily the pictures had some rulers next to them, and you know, so I was able
Oh
to
yeah.
get the right exact measurements so I could make sure that it's exactly accurate. The pictures had all sides, even this, they had all sides of the little statue and stuff. So I had to hand sculpt this little guy. The rest of it is laser engraved.
Yeah.
But
Wow. Well, David, thank you so much for this. This is really informative, and it actually makes me want to go do some more research, which is kind of cool. Which is what we encourage everybody to do,
right,
especially for the new year as we're studying the Book of Mormon. We want you to go on to David's YouTube channel, check him out, subscribe, and then of course subscribe to this channel as well, as we're trying to produce new content. David will be back on again with more stuff, as well as other people who are going to visit. So just thank you, David, for joining us today. And we're going to just keep visiting us here on Tuesdays, which we'll try to keep bringing new content. And Mark will be back with us as well. And thank you for joining us on Hidden in the Heartland podcast.